This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Happy New Year, Part 2. This is Mary Lou Kaiser, host here at the Play Your Position podcast. And as promised, in today's episode, you will hear 23 remarkable voices of the men who appeared on the podcast in 2023. In the previous episode, you had a chance to hear the women. Today, you will find these 23 men and their messages incredibly compelling. And there is a list of these men in alphabetical order by first name in the show notes, along with a way to connect with them online. I encourage you to follow the ones who resonate with you and align with your passions and goals. What's really cool about this particular episode is together, these voices harmonize to redefine the essence of leadership in our era. And this show from the start has been centered around playing your position, which is the core of leadership. In the tapestry of conversations and revelations shared by these thought leaders over the last 12 months, the concept of leadership transcends traditional boundaries. From Dr. Taylor Hartman's groundbreaking psychological revelations on core motives shaping human behavior, to Andy Haight's call for courageous self-reflection and feedback, each man you're going to hear from today weaves a unique thread into the fabric of leadership evolution. They echo the sentiment that leadership is no longer confined to a pedestal, for it begins with the profound understanding that Mark Brodinski articulates. The first call to leadership is the reflection in the mirror where each of us leads the person staring back. I've been thinking about what it means to lead in the 21st century for quite some time now. And I feel that these two conversations, the one yesterday that dropped with the women and the one today, this compilation of voices, really anchors for us the diversity of leaders and also the universal truths about leadership. Today, we are standing at the confluence of ideas that transcend industries, cultures, and boundaries. And these 23 illuminating perspectives culminate in what I call a symphony, resonating with a single resounding truth. Leadership is not a destination. It's a collective journey, a continuous metamorphosis, and that continuous metamorphosis echoes the sentiment of Kevin Maney, urging us to aspire for category leadership, the pinnacle of excellence. So let's embrace these insights. Let's embark on this transformative journey together as we stand on the cusp of a new year. In this amazing group of men lies the blueprint for a new era of leadership, a leadership that's compassionate, adaptive, and tirelessly aspires towards excellence. Welcome to the threshold of Leadership Redefined. Team PYP, I now give you the men of 2023.
You know, I work, honestly, Mary Lou, I wanted to help people get better. And in my field of psychology, everything depends on this, depends on that. It's always this, it's very vague. And I thought that just doesn't work for me. I want to give people answers like math is 2 + 2, and it's 4, right? So when I did like a second PhD researching what could I count on always for a Black person that's 85 in Seattle or a newborn Mexican baby in Florida, what is something I could hang on to that was always true? And what I discovered was the driving core motive, which is so cool because it's not just your behavior. Like if you do certain things that describes who you are, it actually explains why you do what you do. So your why. So for Reds, that is power. And power means they love to move from A to B. They just are like sharks. They have to be moving or they're not okay, right? And Blues and Reds are the heavyweights. They spend their life trying to control other people. Blues are driven by intimacy. They crave connection, sharing, revealing. They're more emotional. Reds are more logical. And they are both controllers. And by the way, blues are stronger with control than reds because it's all about emotion and morality. Then you have the whites, and the whites, they're like the hippies of the color code. They're just so misunderstood. They don't talk and flap their lips, so nobody knows who they really are. But they don't have that ego base that other colors have. They're driven by peace. They love peace. And then the yellows are the fun lovers. They're driven by fun. And Mary Lou, as we've done this work for so many years now, I've realized there's 35% blue, 25% red, 20% yellow personalities around the world with their core motives.
There are two anchor points, and both of those anchor points require a great degree of clarity. The two anchor points are, where am I and where do I want to be? Many people will have a lot of difficulty answer those questions. And what I would first do is I would start with, where am I? Where am I truly? And that means you need to do an honest check-in with yourself. You need to ask yourself, where I am in life, am I happy? Am I really, truly happy? And a lot of people will not even answer that question in a thorough, honest way, because they have this idea that they should be happy. And they have a decent life. They earn money. They're in a relationship. They're relatively healthy. By today's standards, the word healthy has been, cannibalized. It's not really health, what people talk about health. But let's just say you sort of have what the average person has in America, which compared to the rest of the world is considered extraordinary, like not even fathomable for most people. And you really need to be honest with yourself and ask yourself, am I happy with the way that things are? And if the answer is no, then ask yourself, what about the way my life is not making me happy?
Well, I'm very biased to this because it's had a massive impact on my life, but I'm a really big fan of coaching. And really, when you look at coaching, it's really accountability. What I know to be true is human nature. We tend to disappoint ourselves the most. However, when we commit to someone else, interestingly enough, it should be the exact opposite. But when you have someone that you actually are being held accountable to, a lot of times you don't want to disappoint that other person. So for me, and I've seen this hundreds and thousands of times, I'm an anecdotal experience of this. When you hire, and I actually recommend hiring, because when you pay someone, there's an energy exchange and there's a level of commitment that if you don't do that, that doesn't exist. And you reduce the probability for success. But when you hire someone to hold you accountable, especially if they have an area expertise or they've been where you want to go, you're going to dramatically increase the probability for success.
First call to leadership is the first time you can remember being able to see yourself in the mirror. So let's all get granular about this, right? Because you're all leading one person in life, and that's you. Whether you think you're a leader of people or not, you are, because you got to lead that person that's staring back at you through the glass every single day. So that's like the basic. But in terms of a bigger leadership role, I've been doing that pretty much my entire life, especially when I got to college and worked on the university newspaper as the entertainment editor. And then went into television, became a TV producer, went into insurance sales, and went from agent into leadership within just a few years. And then it's becoming a leader in terms of motivation, inspiration, and like you said, positively impacting the lives of 1 billion people. You have this mission inside of you that is in my soul and came about probably about 7-8 years ago, because your soul doesn't shout, it just whispers to you. And all of a sudden I was like, this is what I want to do. But how am I going to do that? And then the You Matter movement kind of crystallized itself kind of organically, which I can tell the story about. But, leadership it can be on a sales team, it could be for a newspaper, it could be for a TV broadcast, but then it's more of a global movement to lead people through a journey of making sure that they are doing all they can with all they have been given.
But I have a saying that I try to get my team to understand, and that is excellence never goes out of business. And if you are an excellent person, if you're an excellent leader, if you're an excellent husband, spouse, father, whatever you are, if you're excellent at that, it never goes out of business, no matter what happens. And I think the businesses that fail, or the people that fail, or that don't achieve what they want, is because in some area of their life, they choose to not be excellent. And whether they don't want to admit that or not, it is a fact. You know, they start coming in a little bit later to work. They start not putting in the effort they put in at the beginning. We can see this a lot in relationships. You know, at the beginning, it's, you know, flowers every week for your significant other. And then the next thing you know, 10 years later, they haven't gotten any flowers. And then they wonder why there's like a breakdown in the communication in the relationship. But I think that if you develop this thought process that I'm going to be excellent in everything that I do, I'm going to be excellent in the way that I communicate with my team, with my relationships, the way that I communicate with my superiors and subordinates, the way that I communicate with outside vendors and strangers. If you become excellent in everything that you do, it'll never go out of business.
I did resist leadership for a long time, and I think that, you know, some people don't they don't sort of listen to that call for leadership. They maybe walk in the other direction, and I nearly did that same thing as well. But I have a little phrase that I always say to myself around this, which is grow or life will make you grow. So you don't have an option. Like, there is no safe space to go, do you know what? I'm going to let the hard work be done by someone else and sit on the couch, because pain will come your way eventually where you need to grow. So you can either grow now or life will make you do it. So which one do you want to do? And so the same thing applies to why I run Body Talk, because, you know, going back to being a child, I really struggled with communication, and I was very awkward with people. I was very shy as a child. I'm highly introverted, and I got diagnosed just last year when I was 44. I finally got diagnosed as being autistic. And so there was various reasons why, as a child, I was struggling with communication, but I didn't know what these things were back then. I just knew that other people seemed to be better at having conversations and making banter and having like playful jokes together and building friendships and so on. And I was always kind of the awkward kid on the outside of that.
And leadership is lonely. It's a lonely place to be, because you can't go home and talk to your spouse about this. You can't go talk to your friends because they don't feel any sympathy. Like, this is just a soul searching. Who am I? What am I going to do? So the concept of exiting, everybody around you will say you're very successful, but internally you still struggle with this. So our first question with our owners, most owners just want to get the information. What are my choices? Like, what are my different exit options? We basically talk about the 5 major exit options. Most people think I have one. I got to sell my business. And it's not true. You don't have to, because there's an exit of you as an employee where you can own the stock and keep it and get recurring revenue and get what we call mailbox money. Or you can sell the company and stay in as an employee and just take some chips off the table. There's more options available than I have to, but most business owners perceive an exit is I sell my company and I leave. And so our goal is to let them know there's kind of like, you know, when you make a recipe, you've got like 3 areas. Like, you've got your meats. Some people like chicken, some shrimp, some beef, different pork, and then you have your vegetables. Some people like different vegetables in theirs. And then there's different sauces, sometimes a little sweeter, sometimes a little spicier. And every exit, you grab a little meat, you grab a little veggie, you grab a little spice, and you make it the way you want it. So the question is, owner, what do you want?
Followed a more conventional path. I think my family always thought I would go to university. I studied mathematics and physics. I would go into finance, banking, something conventional management consulting. And I think the first call to leadership, before it was stepping into that role as a leader, I think 18-year-old Josh was very fortunate. I'd left London. I was living and went to a university about 150 miles outside London called Bath. Bath would be pronounced in the US. I've learned quickly enough to repronounce certain words with a slightly different pronunciation. And I was living away from home, and I think the first stepping stone into my call to leadership was a call to my values. and called to living a passion-driven life. I realized that this path that I was going down, even before it was stepping into a leadership role, really wasn't congruent to who I wanted to be or how I wanted to show up in the world. I wasn't excited about just earning a lot of money, but also jumping into the hamster wheel that life in those very corporate industries forces you into.
The idea that someone who has oversight responsibility doesn't want to know because they may be potentially culpable for something. And so it's easier to just let things go the way that they're going rather than to, to be sort of a whistleblower yourself, or to at least look at the possibility that things are being done in a way that doesn't fit the mission and vision of the organization. So I stumbled on that recently, and just in recalling my situation and what my staff and I went through at the time, it's a perfect acronym or description of what was going on. You had a layer of the organization that was led by an extremely corrupt individual who had found those people to support his perspective who were also corruptible. And anyone that he ran into or they ran into that was not corruptible to that degree, then they devised methods for getting rid of them, or putting them in a situation where they had no choice but to find something else to do, to elect, another avenue, look for other employment, to leave the organization, whatever.
The transition from sport into business, I think high performance sport can be similar in ways to business leaders, and there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from it. So in terms of my own journey, I think in terms of tennis, I think resilience is a big thing. As a sports person, you have to be very resilient. You mentioned traveling around the world. You're traveling around the world, yes. You're playing in a lot of nice places, but you're winning matches, but you're also losing a lot of matches as well. And you have to be resilient in terms of kind of, goal setting and bouncing back from those tough defeats. So I think sport really teaches you a lot around that. And then in terms of business, I think that kind of self-leadership piece is really important, of actually having that vision and having those goals of what you're looking to achieve, and then being really focused on achieving them, and focusing on what you can do on a daily basis to help you achieve those goals.
I consider myself to be really an entrepreneur. I didn't join the workforce as an employee. I joined the workforce as a builder. And I imagine most of your listeners, or many, I assume anyway, would be considering themselves to be entrepreneurs. And I think that entrepreneurs really see themselves as builders first, primarily, and then often leadership comes second. And so for me, I started my first company and sold it. I can get into more details there. And I started the next company. It wasn't until probably when we had a growth phase, from when we were about 20 staff and went to 40 staff, this really rapid growth phase, where I realized that my role in the company had to change. And I think what I was before was probably more of a builder, where I was in the trenches doing work, leading by example, but not leading as a prescriptive coach. And you can't just keep doing that forever. And when we went from 20 to 40, you put up scaffolding, you put up frameworks, you have a new layer of leadership, and you need to coach those leaders. And my role went from doer to coach pretty quickly. I think that's when I realized that I needed to learn how to do that, and then it just kept on going from there.
So let's just call it what it is. It's not the most sexy part of business. But you hear, it's not the most sexy part, but it's the most crucial and important part. Because here's the thing, you hear about sales, you hear about marketing and this tactic or that thing people are doing to driving more revenue, this thing they're doing to get more customers. Everybody wants to talk about that. Everybody wants to, pay attention to that. But this is actually, if you do it the wrong way, it can actually be boring and, take a long time. And so people just end up procrastinating and then they don't do it. And you even have situations where companies can get so large and they don't have procedures or processes in place because they just have relied on people just having it in their head, and they've gotten by doing that. But eventually they get to a point where the thing just breaks and you can't move forward anymore because you can't just depend on it being stuck in people's heads, right? Or so the thing I'm trying to do in this interview is literally give listeners a framework on how to get started documenting procedures, and also have the employees be part of that process, and then incentivize the employees to be part of that process, so that the culture at the company now becomes a thing where everybody is all involved in this continuous improvement, and it's not a thing where it's just solely dependent on you or solely dependent on one manager.
And so what we found in a business context, community is really important because it basically de-risks every other part of the business. And to zoom out even more, what I would say is that the reason why that's the case is that the way people buy things has shifted over the past, decade or more. And of course, the Orbit user base, for context, 99% of our customers are software companies. So B2B, B2C, SaaS for the most part. But I think this actually holds true across basically any category of purchase. So there was a time when if you wanted to buy something, you had to talk to a salesperson. You would, go to the showroom floor and they would show you the sofas, or like a vacuum cleaner salesperson, the car, like somebody would come to your house, and this sort of authority figure would walk you through the options, and like your only option was to purchase. Yeah, exactly. We're rewatching Mad Men right now, and there's a scene where like the vacuum cleaner guy comes by. No, he's actually an air conditioner salesman. It's all the same. It's like this authority figure who's, your only option is to go through this single source of truth. They have all the information. They have all the power. Because of the internet, because of so many other trends and themes, now when we are considering purchasing something, what do? Well, the last thing we want to do is talk to a salesperson, almost always. And this is true whether you're buying, a grill for the backyard or an important piece of B2B software. We go and we read reviews. We may go to Reddit and see what they say about it. I mean, I bought a backpack recently for travel, and like, I didn't want to talk to a salesperson about that. I wanted to read what everybody else is saying.
I've been fascinated by the money game since I was, like you said, 12 years old. And I've always, seen that money doesn't make the world go round, but it makes things in your life a lot easier if you have some. And so why don't we learn about it? I always say on my podcast, because I have a podcast called the Wealth Architect Podcast, and I tell my viewers and listeners, hey, listen, they spend more time talking about Romeo and Juliet and King Tut and the Pythagorean theorem in our schools than they tell us about, taxes and relationships and buying a car and negotiating a house, mortgage, the stock market. And so if we're not going to educate people, then basically what you have to do is you have to take electives. You have to meet people like me, after your formal education is over, and learn about the thing that we use the most every day. And that's money. I use it every day. I don't know about you, but but unfortunately we didn't take any classes or very limited classes taught by people that don't know the game of money. And so I unfortunately have to kind of plug the gap. And so do other people in my business. And I just want to make the world a little bit better place, just to maybe change one person's life at a time.
What I've learned is that with financial independence comes the ability to live life on your own terms. It means you have the ability to make a bigger, a better impact in the world because you can spend time using your talents the way they were meant to be used, and you can use your energy and align yourselves with other people that have the same energy, which means you're going to solve more problems. You're going to help the world in a bigger way. You're probably going to make more money because you align yourself with others that share the passion for doing what it is you do. So I feel that it's my duty and obligation to take what I've learned and help share this with other people so that now they can learn their skills. The problem is we don't teach money in schools, right? We started a local program here with one of the nonprofits to help teach financial literacy. But what I found, Mary Lou, is we'd host these classes and we had all the students come in. They were high school students. And you know, he was sitting in the back of the room, their parents. And I was like, well, and it dawned on me, I was like, wait a minute, like, yeah, these students need to learn how to, start a checking account and get a credit card and learn about things, basic things like credit, right? But their parents weren't taught these things either.
Somewhere around 2013, 2014, my co-authors, Al, Chris, and Dave, who had been CEOs and company founders and all those kinds of things in the past, had started a business advising startups. And they had a few sort of scattered concepts that they were bringing to companies, but they had this sort of central insight that by this point in time, I had been I'd written for 2 decades or more about technology and for publications and books and all this. So I had a pretty good understanding of what was developing in the field. And their sort of core observation was that, especially in digital markets, because in a digital market, anyone anywhere in the world can access the best of anything that they want. There's no borders like geographical distribution and things like that used to exist. And so in most digital markets tended to end up being a winner take all market. Like one company would take 75, 80% of the market share and most of the profits out of it. And you'd have a couple of stragglers following them. And so if that's true, if the winner of a market category takes all of the economics out of the category, then if you sort of reverse engineer that idea, it's like, well, if you're starting a company or running a startup, why wouldn't you want to do everything possible to increase the odds of you being that category leader? Because otherwise you're just going to end up scraping for some market share in somebody else's category.
When you're a production company like ours, like 80% of what we do is branded content, right? So it's stuff that's funded by a brand. It's a lot of it is quite creative and it's documentary driven. And we've done some stuff that have already been in film festivals, but tangential to that, companies like ours will raise their creative profile by doing independent projects. That'll be web series, short films. Right now we're doing a big comedy project in Nashville. So other things that are not directly funded by brands or publishers. In this case, you make these and then publishers will say, oh, that's another arrow in their quiver. Maybe they'll get some creative accolades for it. We're going to enter it into a number of film festivals, but that'll be the point of that is now, okay, now we show we can do this. We show we can maybe win awards for it. Now we'll have a brand or a publisher or an online platform that will want to fund another one.
One of the biggest misconceptions advertisers have is what you just said. And that is, should I be in social media? Should I be in video? Should I be in connected TV? Should I be? Marketing has changed over the years. What has changed is the way we get the message out. Okay, all of the social media options, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, on and on. All of the digital advertising types of tools, connected TV, et cetera, those types of things, those change and they allow us, right, to get the message out to people quickly, efficiently, and more importantly, allow us, people like us, like me, to track and see the efficiency of every dollar we're spent is being spent. So we can adjust and get better and better. But, and this is a capital, I'm doing the air thing here. Capital B-U-T, right? But the thing that has not changed, and the one mistake that we see on a regular basis is companies don't spend the time to really create their messaging.
Everyone moves on. I was talking to my friend Scott Britton, who sold his company Salesforce, and he was on some podcast saying like, what what have you learned? And he's like, it's cool, but people just get over it, and they were not as like it's not like all of a sudden they treat me like a completely different person, like I'm this amazing person who's had his big exit, right? Everyone moves on, and so you have to really enjoy the journey. You have to really appreciate it, and that's not to say that you obviously don't get to be in new positions, have new opportunities, and because you've made this achievement, but the achievement is just a result, a natural result of doing all the sort of right steps along the way, right? What is it? Bill Walsh, who says the score takes care of itself. I think the same thing is true in life and business.
As you heard my journey earlier, I was a former fat kid too. And I had my own body dysmorphia issues. I didn't like the way I looked. I was bullied by the way I looked. I was made fun of. I mean, heck, I told you earlier, I had man boobs. What kind of guy wants to be walking around with man boobs and being made fun of by that? So, and the only two options I was given was testosterone replacement therapy or plastic surgery, right? And you, as you mentioned earlier, like females are only given one option. It's diet, 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 but they change the diet every other day. And all the information we get every other day, as you mentioned earlier, some of these, I don't want to call, I'm going to call them nuts because that's what they are. Some of these nuts out here are telling you not to eat fruits and vegetables. It's like, what? Study after study has showed you eating more fruits and vegetables will be helpful. Everything in moderation. And a key takeaway here is the 80-20 rule. So we hear about this all the time, but are you doing 80% of the week you want it to be, and then 20% being free? So what do I mean by that? When I talk about someone who's training for something, we get closer to that competition day, or if we're just trying to get ready for the summer, then you have to be 95-5, meaning you have to be 95 in tune with your diet and 5% liberal. If you're trying to be just coasting, you're happy where you're at and be sustainable, how do we make it fit that 80-20 rule? And if we look at a day or actually a week of breakfast, lunches, and dinners, that's 21 meals. So out of those 21 meals, can you hit 17 of them with the way you want?
Like, I've been reading all these books for years, and one day my daughter, she was 13 years old at the time, she walked in and she goes, Dad, can you pick me out a book to read? I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, pick me out a book to read. I'm like, why do you want me to pick you out a book? She goes, I see all these books you've read. I see how positive you are. And I see the success you're having. And this is a really cool story, if I could share this, Mary Lou. So she comes in, so I pick her out a book. It was a John Gordon book. If anybody knows who he is, John Gordon, he wrote The Energy Bus. That's one of his most famous books, but he's written so many books. And I picked out a book called The Seed. And so, she grabs it, she starts walking out, and she goes, oh, by the way, can you give me a journal too? And I'm like, a journal? I'm like, what are you going to do with a journal? And she goes, well, I want a journal like the first one you ever got, so I can write in it all the places I'm going to go, all the things I'm going to do, and all the people I'm going to help. And Mary Lou, she's 13 years old at the time. So tell me, she wasn't hearing what I was saying. She was catching what I was doing.
So I would say, and this is difficult in today's times, question everything you see and hear, whether it's from me or anybody else, because there is so much disinformation out there on everything. There is no, if you're watching the news, the nightly news, man, that is such a huge mistake. There is nothing true on there at all. So I would definitely say today more than ever, you have to question whether it's authority, whether it's conventional wisdom. You definitely have to, I was born, I guess I was always a natural born cynic. So I never believed anything anyone told me. I had to figure all that stuff out for myself. And sometimes that was good and sometimes that was bad. But I think in the end, it's worked out pretty well.
Be courageous to write down that perhaps scary future that you'd love to create for yourself. Lean into possibility versus predictability. That would be one. And if we really want to grow as people and leaders and business folk, be courageous and ask for feedback and receive feedback. It's the only way that we're able to see our blind spots. And the blind spots are the things that when we release that tethers us to the ground, when we release that, we'll become more free.
And that's a wrap. I just love saying that. What a great group of guys this year. I tell you, I feel so lucky to have the opportunity to speak with as many amazing leaders as I do. And I can't think of a better way to end the 23 voices than with what Andy Height shares. Don't be afraid to not just imagine your scary future, but to write it down, to seek feedback so that you can refine yourself. Because in today's ever-evolving landscape of leadership, the concept of leading has taken on multifaceted dimensions. It's not just about commanding a team or steering a company, the way for so many years that's how leadership was presented. Today, it's about introspection, adaptation, and understanding the core of human motivation and behavior. In essence, team, today's leadership extends beyond traditional boundaries. I think that's super exciting. It's about self-awareness, adaptability, empathy, innovation, and a constant quest for improvement. I think every single man in one way or another touched on the importance of personal growth and also the impact our actions and decisions has on society at large. My sincerest hope for all of you, Team PYP, as you enter a new year, is that you allow the stories my guests share with you throughout the year to influence your own journey of personal growth, of becoming more of the leader you already are, of embodying excellence in everything you do, and that when you fall short of your goals or you don't quite measure up to what you thought you could have been, you grant yourself some grace before picking yourself up and getting back on that metaphorical horse and moving on to what's next. Because 2024 is upon us, and guess what? Then will 2025 be here, and 2026? Time keeps moving on. I have more conversations queued up for you so you never feel lonely on your journey, so you know there's always someone out here you can look to for inspiration, insight, ideas, and guidance. Wishing you all a very happy and healthy new year. This is Mary Lou Kaiser. Remember, it's always a great day to get out there and play your position. Catch you next time.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.